This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.
Would you love to buy land to rewild to native forest, but wondering if you've left it all a little bit too late in life to see any results? The good news is it's probably not too late. In this episode, I visit a stunning property on Banks Peninsula belonging to a retired couple. Listen in to find out about the benefits of good monitoring, registering for carbon credits, and the fascinating role of old tree stumps and road margins for natural regeneration. Today's episode of Rewilding in Action is supported by the Rod Donald Banks Peninsula Trust, whose vision is to create a thriving and enduring ecosystem of trails and regenerating landscapes on Te Pā Takaora Kaihautu Banks Peninsula. Projects supported by the Rod Donald Banks Peninsula Trust are based on 4 strategic pillars, namely access, partnerships, knowledge and biodiversity. For more information about their projects and news, go to roddonaldtrust.co.nz. Kia ora, welcome to Rewilding in Action with me, your host, Maureen Howard. Last week, I promised you an episode on macrocarpa frilling, but for that you'll have to wait another fortnight, because instead, in this episode, I join husband and wife team, Bob Webster and Carol Jensen, on the 74 hectares they purchased in 2012 on Banks Peninsula for the purpose of conservation. When they bought the property, Bob and Carol were just a few years off retirement. I asked Bob to describe where we are.
Well, we're on the main ridge of Banks Peninsula, 700 metres above sea level, looking down into Little River, and our land extends from the ridge here down to about 380 metres on the south-facing slope. And we bought the land in 2012 with a specific aim of protecting it for conservation. It had been grazed for generations prior to that, but it was probably marginal grazing country because of the south aspect and the steep slopes, and because it was marginal, the bush was starting to regenerate naturally anyway, and so that was becoming pretty difficult to manage stock. So the farmer put it on the market, and we got interested.
And Carol, when did you first spot this piece of property?
Well, actually we should go back to Bob, because he's a runner, and he was on a big round run and spotted the for sale sign and thought, this looks nice. And he came home and said, oh, you've got to come and see it. And it started from there. We fell in love with it and had to have it. But it took us about a year to negotiate buying it.
And had you retired already at this point?
No, we were both working still, and but we were not far away from retirement, and used some of our retirement savings to buy the land. But since we have retired, it's been a real retirement job for us, and it's actually been a focus for our lives, probably 10 years now.
Well, I must admit, it is absolutely incredibly beautiful here. But when you first came, this was grass here at this point, was it?
It was a clearing of grass, and it's surrounded by some big old totara and broadleaf forest. So at this point it was grass, but...
Right, and there were stock on it. Was that the first thing that you did to get the stock off?
Yes, we did, at least in theory. There were sort of incursions over the next 10 years, but now it's pretty stock-free, although there is a deer problem. But
red deer?
Yes, red deer, and we can't do much about it. It's very difficult to shoot or get rid of. So.
Yeah. It was 74 hectares?
Yes.
What proportion was in forest, what proportion was in grass?
About a third of the property was in original forest, so it's very old totara forest with broadleaf. Some of the trees are probably 500 years old, so you've got a third of it in original forest with regenerating trees under the old trees, and a third of it is grassland, just rough pasture, and a third of it is regenerating back towards forest. Because there's quite an altitudinal range from 380 metres up to 700, there's a bit of change in vegetation species from sort of lowland forest down below the road, which bisects the property, up to what is called upper cool temperate forest up the top.
And you told me when we were coming here to bring good warm clothes, and I've got my thermals on and some layers, and I'm feeling pretty good. But it definitely is quite a few degrees cooler.
Yes, and we do call it cloud forest because it's often under cloud. The northeasterly comes over as quite a cool wind and full of moisture, which has its advantages because there's always plentiful moisture.
Right, for the plants.
Yes.
And it's a wonderfully unique ecosystem. We've got totara broadleaf, five-finger, but it's all in lovely little mixed clumps.
Yes, when we bought the land, a lot of the vegetation areas were establishing already, even under grazing, but the species were all unpalatable species that cattle and sheep, and cattle in particular, would eat. So that totara and pepper tree were quite common. But over the time that we've been here, with sort of 12 years now of retirement, the species composition has changed quite significantly. We're now finding a lot of those palatable species are popping up and becoming quite prevalent.
Yes, but Carol, you are a botanist by training and in your previous work. What have been some of the exciting things that you've seen come up here themselves?
Yes, well, in particular, broadleaf and five-finger that were just all grazed out previously, and also the asterias, palatable ferns, flaxes, things like that are all very common on the road edges because the road edges haven't been grazed for 100 or ever really, and once you take the stock off, they all come back in. Yeah.
So do you think then that actually that the road edges have been a seed source for your land?
Yes, definitely.
Isn't that amazing? Because they're a very neglected ecosystem, underappreciated.
Yes, and in the past, absolutely damaged by the road clearances and things, but locally we have had recent success, and they have been tried their best to try and do things a bit more sensitively.
Yeah. And apart from removing the livestock as much as you could, I understood it took a little while, what were some of the next actions that you took?
Yeah. Well, initially we got rid of the stock, but then we formed a covenant over the whole property, and in this case with the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust, which is an opportunity we've got on Banks Peninsula, and as part of that they assisted us to fence the whole, make sure that the property was properly fenced and stock proof.
So are they like a similar to QE2 then? Yeah,
it's a fairly unique organisation here on the peninsula, that there's a covenanting agency apart from QE2, but they do the same job as QE2, and the covenant is similar, and it's registered on your title, so it goes with the land. When you sell it, the next owner needs to abide by the conditions of the covenant. But that was the first thing, and then we also looked at carbon credits as an opportunity for some income from the land, because without that there was no real potential income. So we went through the process of registering about 15 or 16 hectares of the 74 with, well, and that's in that stage it was with a permanent forest sink initiative, but it's transferred into the ETS now. And that was an exercise to get it registered, because of the nature of the forest being such a diversity of species and ages, and the distribution is not uniform in any way at all. But eventually we did get it registered, and since then price of carbon has increased a lot. We thought we'd never make much out of it at all, but it's actually been reasonably worthwhile.
By traps and baits.
Yeah. And so did you start trapping quite soon after you arrived too?
Yeah, it took us a year or two. We started with monitoring of pests for quite a few years using chew cards. We'd set up a network of about 80 or 90 chew cards spread around the property, and a distribution that we could do exactly the same thing every year. We did that for a number of years before we started trapping.
Mainly to provide the locations of possums, like they favour the fuchsia forest.
And I don't think many people do that, do the monitoring for a period of time. We tend to just jump into action. So it's really good. Yeah. And Carol, your botanical background through your work, you've become quite systematic, and monitoring's been a big part of it, hasn't it?
Yes. And so right at the start we set up transects and plots to monitor the vegetation, and that was because we wanted to try and monitor the effect of taking the stock off. Of course, they're very scattered examples, and there's no huge changes showing up on it, but over time I think it will, and all this data is all stored, it's all available. We started off annual monitoring for the first 5 years, and now we've gone to 5-year blocks, so we're due to do another 5-year block soon.
Some of our transects were set up specifically to monitor what happened from the edge of existing forest areas out into the grassland, and those transects have shown a lot of them have shown quite a dramatic increase in the number of stems of woody species, native species, out from the edge of the forest. And transects that are out in the middle of the grassland, it's still looking about the same. The grassland composition's still similar, but where you've got forests nearby, and particularly Carnica has been the most dramatic one, there's some of those transects now taking a photo up the transect is pretty meaningless, because you've just got these trees in front of you. You can't see up the line anymore. Yeah.
So it just shows what change can happen in a short period of time.
Yep, definitely.
And we established photo points as well, and photos looking up and down the transects, and also distant shots of whole faces, because that shows the gross changes in the occurrence of slips and things like that.
And so, well, back to the pests. What do you trap here?
We're trapping possums and mustelids, and as bycatch we're catching rats, hedgehogs, and we've got a network. It takes us about 3 hours to walk around every week, and about 23 possum traps and about the same number of stoat traps. We do it every week, and hard to pick up a pattern.
There really has been no trend of possums, even
declining.
No. And we think it's because they just reinvade, because there's no trapping around us, and so they just simply make up the numbers, which is a bit disheartening. We have got some friends that are possum experts, and from looking at our figures, they think it's probably low numbers, right? And we're managing to keep it low numbers.
There's no dramatic impact of possums anyway. No. They're probably having some impact, but it's not as if they're decimating the forest at all. You don't see a lot of evidence of dieback or anything. Yeah.
Now, one of the things, because I'll be interviewing Hugh Wilson soon, and I'm sure we'll get on to the topic of gorse. What about the gorse situation here? How was it when you first came on?
When we bought the land, there was gorse, and there were 4 or 5 sort of what you'd call infestations of gorse, where the gorse was sort of above head height and it was dominant over that small area. And there are other scattered gorse plants around the place. We actually mapped all that with GPS when we bought the land, and we've kept that updated. And we actually got Hugh over here to have a look at the land and asked him what he would do with the gorse, whether he'd leave it and let natural regeneration occur under the old gorse, or whether he'd get rid of it. And he said, well, given that we didn't have a lot of gorse and we had a lot of natural regeneration anyway, he said that if he had the energy, he'd get rid of it. And I think that have you got the energy is the active question in that, because it does take a lot of effort to get rid of gorse. And so we actually took the approach that we would control it, and we cut down all the big gorse trees, cut them down to ground and pasted them, and which killed those big trees. But of course there's a seed source in the ground for probably 50 or 60 years, so we have to keep going back to each of those infestation areas every year and just pull out the seedlings or spray them. But it's an operation which you can do with sort of secateurs or a pair of loppers and a little hand spray. There's no big gorse out in those areas anymore, but there always have been some gorse in shrubland and bush areas, and we haven't bothered controlling those at all. They're not going to go anywhere. They can't spread out. It's too shady around them. So we've just left them, and they're just getting older, and eventually they'll die out.
Bracken is taking over a lot of those places where there was gorse, and that's helping to suppress it as well.
Now, I'm really interested to talk a little bit more about the bracken, because we did see it as we were driving up. In some places it's come through the grass too, hasn't it?
Yeah, no, the bracken's spread over a number of the grassland areas, and which we think is quite good because it shades out the grass and it does enable some native seedlings to establish. There's not a lot of evidence of that yet, but we have seen it on other nearby properties that seedlings have come punching through the bracken.
What tends to come through the bracken?
The broadleaf and five-finger and all the broadleafs and the coprosmas and stuff, yeah.
Also just the fact that since grazing's been taken off, the grass has got quite thick and rank, and that in itself slows down gorse germination, I think.
Oh, that's interesting. Yes. The species of grass that you have here, because as we were coming up, you were saying there's cocksfoot down near the bottom, and then as we come up, was it
brown top and sweet vernal, which are the grasses you get in the high country and unimproved grassland will be brown top and sweet vernal, whereas cocksfoot favours the damper, deeper soils. Yeah.
And would you say then that it's a little bit easier for natives to come up through the brown top?
Yes, because
the cocksfoot grows very tall. It'll grow up to sort of shoulder height, and Yorkshire fog too down below.
And some wetter places, that's very dense.
Because I'm interested to talk about the grass, because some people have said, well, the gorse kind of speeds things up a little bit. It replaces the grass, and then natives come through. But we're never going to actively spread gorse seed. But on the areas of rank grass that you have, what is the natural successional process that you're seeing there that is slowly happening?
Wow, just the bush edge spreading out from the gorse edge, the young seedlings that will germinate in light shade once the grass has been shaded out, so that you see these little copses of native bush spreading out further and further, and as it shades out the grass you'll get the natives coming in. So that's the process. Very rarely do you ever get anything coming up in tall rank cocksfoot.
Yes, so it does seem to work higher up in the brown top. So that's
shorter grass.
That's really good to know. Well, we can see it all around us here, evidence of these wonderful clumps of mixed little toteras and broadleaves all clumped together and spreading out.
Yeah, they sort of protect each other, they work together, you get these little clumps, because it is quite windy up here, and we could show you sites where these clumps look aerodynamic. So they work together to give themselves shelter. And also you'll find five fingers and broadleaf popping up in the middle of unpalatable trees where they've established where deer and other animals can't get at them. The whole property was originally covered in forest and tall trees, and a lot of it was cut down in the 1850s, and so there are stumps and logs around the property. And those stumps seem to have created the environment where plants can get established, and it creates an environment where the grass isn't as dominant, and in often places where stock can't get at the plants, and so we often find that around those stumps and logs you get plants establishing. And around the area we're standing now, where there are all these clumps of native bush, if you grovel in under them, you're bound to find a stump there. Totara or even cedar.
Which is
Really, the native
rare.
cedar, the mountain.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Oh,
We
exciting.
do actually have a cedar on the road edge, very close to our boundary.
That you had planted or that had...
No, that's naturally occurring.
Wow.
And we also have, unfortunately, just out of our property, the last remaining adult cedar on Banks Peninsula.
Just north of Dunedin,
Yes.
we also have our cloud forest with wonderful native cedar on it.
Yes.
Really wonderful.
Yes,
Yeah.
but that's lacking here. I mean, it was here.
Common.
Yeah.
It never regenerated very well.
But it
which is
certainly
the
feels
mistake.
cold enough up here for it.
Yeah.
So, although we've got a lot of regeneration around us, and this has been your main focus and your main joy, you have done a little bit of planting, haven't you, as well? In certain parts. Where have you planted?
Just in the deep, the wide grassland slope down lower, which is mainly cocksfoot. We decided to do it just to record that it takes a lot of time and effort, and the results aren't that brilliant. And the lesson, which we already knew, but this sort of proves it, that you're best to spend your time, if you've got native remnants, on weed and pest control, and you'll get billions of trees coming away. And it's a lot of hard work to plant and try and get over that grassland battle.
Yeah.
Probably the biggest problem with the planting has actually just been browsing by animals, particularly deer and hares. And yeah, I did a count this morning because we actually record every tree every year, how it's getting on and what its height is.
And are you required to do that?
No, it's just a fetish.
The scientists and you.
Yeah, but the number of trees that have actually died is actually quite low. Like we've planted 240 odd trees down there in a random distribution over 2 hectares. Only about 30 of them have actually died. So the survival rate's probably 80 or 90%, but they just don't get their head out of the grass because they get browsed off all the time. So to actually find a lot of these trees each year, we can only find them because we've got them GPS'd. You follow the GPS to where the tree's supposed to be, and you look around, you can't see it. Oh, there it is, under the grass, right there. Yeah.
So it's not strictly dead, but
It's not strictly dead, but it's not going anywhere.
And then the ones that do get above the grass, 2 or 3 metres high, the deer come along, strip all the bark off, and I've got a photo of one actually, but that tree is going to die. So it's a real battle, and the only ones that were sort of deer tolerant are the totara and the broadleaf so far, but I suspect they'll go for the broadleaf eventually because they're similar to five-finger, but currently they eat all the five-finger, but I guess they'll move on to the broadleaf soon.
Because you purchased the property in 2012, like Hugh, you're pioneering a different way of doing things and allowing natural regeneration to dominate and giving people an example that's positive and exciting that maybe they could follow. Have you found any difference in the community? Have there been any other projects start up?
Yeah, it's certainly just the last couple of years things have changed dramatically around us, and our property is really now just part of a whole connecting series of properties of about 1,500 hectares running along the ridge from here right out past Mount Herbert and Bradley, the high peaks on the peninsula, and of protected land. And a number of those properties have been bought by individuals or groups of people, mostly people living in Christchurch, who've bought land with fairly unproductive pasture country that's been doing exactly what our property's been doing, just sort of with shrubbery and trees establishing anyway, bought those properties for conservation. And it's a fantastic thing to see. You know, there's a whole network of connected, protected land around us now. So it's quite a change.
So it's been a retirement well worth waiting for.
It certainly has, and it's just great to have a passion and have a project that we're both so keen about. We're always keen to come up and work on it, and it's been great. It's been wonderful.
I'm very grateful to my podcast guests, Bob Webster and Carol Jensen, for sharing their time and their property's rewilding journey. I absolutely loved visiting with them. Two highlights for me were walking through the remnant old-growth forest of tree fuchsia that was dripping with lichen, and also seeing the regenerating clumps of native trees and shrubs that were spreading out into the grass. Each one of them was just so pretty. And also to understand that at the centre of each of these clumps was once an old tree stump cut in the 1850s. That was a real eye-opener for me, and I'm also impressed by the monitoring that Bob and Carol are doing, which is going to provide really valuable data for other properties. Bob and Carol have so much to share. I'd love to do more episodes with them, and actually we do have one more. Not only have they worked on their own property, they have also, with permission and with the help of a running club, frilled 3 macrocarpa plantations on a neighbouring property to allow an understory of natives to flourish. So thank you for listening to Rewilding in Action. I'm Maureen Howard. In my next episode, I'll be on Banks Peninsula to talk with Bob and Carol again about the macrocarpa frilling. Until next time, I will leave you with some birdsong from the naturally regenerating native forest of my guests, Bob Webster and Carol Jensen, rewilders who are letting nature take the lead.
This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.